Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please find a seat, we'll begin in about 1 minute or two. I'd like to call to order the regular Destin City Council meeting for January 2nd, 2018. Meeting is in order. We do not have an invocation tonight, so we're going to have a minute of silence. If you will all please stand. Mr. Marler, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, ma'am. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Council members, any changes to the agenda?
Mayor, if I may, I see, unfortunately, I see the folks from Indian Trail, Indian Bayou are here tonight. And instead of waiting till the end of the meeting, I'm assuming y'all would like to address us for problems y'all are still having? Nope, never mind. Sorry. Thank you. Well, I'm pleasantly surprised. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
Have a motion, second? I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor, please vote aye. Unanimous yes. I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes for October 2nd, 2017.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion, I have a second. Discussion? Any changes? Please vote yes. Or no. Unanimous yes. I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the September 25th meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any discussion, any changes? If not, I call for the vote. Unanimous yes. I'm sorry. Thank you. Well, the voting is still locked. This evening we have the presentation of the plaques for the outdoor decorating contest. If I could have staff join me at the podium, we'll do the presentations from there.
Okay, for the best decorated home belongs to Robert and Karen Lyerly at 124 Indian Bayou Drive. Best decorated business is Hogs Bread Saloon, 541 US Highway 98. Best decorated organization, Harbor Walk Village, 10 Harbor Boulevard. Best Decorated Condominium, Holiday Isle Towers, 770 Gulf Shore Drive. Best on the Harbor, Boat House, 288 Harbor Boulevard. Best Overall Holiday, Jim and Barbara Telford, 19 Indian Bayou Drive.
Ms. IRA Williams has a presentation for us this evening on protection of trees for the city of Destin. Good evening. Please restate your name before you start.
Okay. All right. Let me give it a little PowerPoint. There we go. Hi, I'm IRA Williams. I live at 312 Calhoun Avenue. And tonight I'm representing trees on the coast. We have a short PowerPoint that I'd just like to go over a few things. And so, you know, we say in regards to Destin Tree Preservation and Protection Regulations Ordinance, we're asking for your approval later on this evening. But I also want to commend you for the initiative that you've taken, and when you charge the Environmental Parks and Recreation Board and Tree Board to come up with a draft ordinance. And so after a year and a half of working on this, as I go through, these are just a few snapshots of some of the trees, and there's more examples, but through Destin that have actually, you know, been taken down. Just a few pictures of before and after. This was 4th Street when we had the huge utility cut along 4th Street, which kind of incited you to say, okay, you know, we need to preserve our heritage, and I'd say our heritage certainly involves trees. This again is 4th Street, and a lot of big, magnificent trees that, you know, were there, no longer are. We see it in not just public right-of-ways, but private as well. And so, you know, trees make a lasting impression on how the community is perceived by its residents and the visitors alike. So, why trees? Of course, you know, what do they do for us? I know you know a lot, but trees are beautify and connect our communities. They clean our air. They provide oxygen and provide habitat for wildlife. Trees create a sense of wonder and awe. Trees stimulate the economic development of an area. Trees increase business traffic. They block unsightly things like concrete walls and parking lots and unsightly views. Tree planting means improved water quality, and trees save water. Trees cool the streets of our towns. Trees cool the town by up to 10 degrees Fahrenheit by shading homes and streets and reducing air conditioning by 30 to 50%. Trees shield children from ultraviolet rays, like skin cancer is one of the most common cancers in the United States. trees reduce the UVB exposure by about 50%, thus protecting the children on the playgrounds and their homes. They spend a lot of time outdoors. Trees increase property values, and trees are calming. They reduce stress, and trees bring diverse groups together. And tree street planting helps, the environment. So trees in general add unity. And I think that's, says a lot for what you're trying to accomplish here in our area. But I'd like to just point out a few things to consider in the ordinance. This ordinance is not written to restrict private property, single-family homeowners from pruning or maintaining their trees, but only to protect the specimen, the grand specimen, and the exceptional trees. Private property owners can get approval to remove protected trees through mitigation if necessary. But the goal is to work around removing trees that are substantial, and only those 3 categories. Focus on the definitions of what is protected in the document. It's not meant to prevent an owner from caring for their property. I mean, to the contrary, if the trees are there, then landscaping companies and arborists should have work for a long time. So the ordinance will strive to secure more cooperation between the utilities and the city. If it's necessary to cut or prune and, essential to mitigate, but it also provides more time in the ordinance for consideration for alternative measures if, you need to put in huge utilities. So, hold on, multitasking here. The trees, as I said, provide privacy. They emphasize views, or they screen out objectionable objects, things that are left unseen. So I'm asking you to save, or on behalf of the trees on the coast, I'm asking you to save the historic specimen and exceptional trees. You see, more cuttings. These are just examples. I'm sure there are plenty more out there. The trees coming. So the future must be designed today. I mean, as I've been here 30 years, and as the population increases and the density of our city, there are going to be more people living here, and so we want to make sure that we provide a plan for what our community is going to look like, to continue to beautify it and to connect our communities. Because after the destruction of the trees, you just can't get them back. It takes 40 or 50 years to grow a tree of that magnitude and size. Once they're gone, they're gone. Again, trees cool the streets in our towns. So the choice is yours, and we appreciate the opportunity, to be able to say a few words in support of it this evening. You can continue to let people cut at their discretion, or we can have nice tree-lined trees and preserve the big trees that we have in the city of Destin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll see.
Theresa Bear from the would like to speak on the Environmental Parks and Recreations Committee. She's a member of the Environmental Parks and Recreation Committee, Tree Board, and she would like to speak on that this evening.
Good evening, Mayor, councilman persons, man. I am Theresa Bear. I am the chairwoman of the Environmental Parks Recreation Committee Tree Board, and I'm here to present the annual report. And for sake of brevity, I provided each of you a copy of that report so you can review that in detail. But the 3 highlights of what we were accomplished in 2017 that for the Environment, Parks and Recreation Committee completed a complete review and inspection of all the parks throughout the city of Destin, making changes, upgrades, and making sure that the bathrooms, the fences, the bleachers, areas that people come in from out of town and stay. We were able to get funding from y'all to make a nice upgrade to several of these big parks, especially Morgan's Complex, which is used by different states, not just the city of Destin, for all sorts of sports activities. So thank you for that monetary donation from the city to make sure we could upgrade those. The other was the Arbor Day ceremony. The city had their annual Arbor Day ceremony, which was held on April 28th at the Main Street Park with Mayor Fisher presiding and committee member Williams speaking. And it was nice because not only were we able to plant some new trees there, we were also able to take out some of the debris and some of the rough areas and put a nice green, extending the park area from just the picnic bench close to the Joe's Bayou bench area, but all the way through down. So you'll see there's more families, more dog walking, and more people enjoying that small park. And the third item is the Ordinance 17-23-LC, the amendment to the tree moratorium on tree cutting. That is up for first reading tonight, and as Myra presented, those are for your review and decision during first reading if those events should take place and those changes should be incorporated. Some are not what we presented to start with, but through the legal process and the city process, what you have in front of you is due for the first reading tonight. So with that, thank you for letting me present our report, and I look forward to serving you for the next year on this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Great report. I believe council originally requested to again review the 90% site plan on Royal Melvin Heritage Park. Ms. Lejeune?
Yes, sir. Mr. David Campbell, city engineer, has put together a very brief PowerPoint to go ahead and let the council and the public take a look at what we have for the plans.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor,
There was a motion, recommended motion on the last item.
I'm sorry, did that require a motion? Yep. Okay. I'm sorry.
there is a recommended motion here.
Okay. Would
I'll be glad to make the recommended motion.
Thank you.
Okay, yes. I move that the council approve the EPRT Committee's fiscal year 2017 annual report and fiscal year 2018 work plans.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote. Unanimous, yes. Sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Lejeune.
No, that's fine. So Mr. Campbell will go through the presentations, and then if you have any questions afterwards, we'll be happy to answer what we can.
Mayor, council members, what I'm going to attempt to do is show you some of the more important elements to this park. I understand we also sent you a copy of the construction drawings, and I hope you've had a chance to review those, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have on the construction drawings as well. This is the original concept plan back in 2013 from Tetra Tech. Tetra Tech is our engineer of record on this project. And what you see here is a 15-foot pathway, and at the closer to the bottom of the hill towards the harbor is a resource center and bathrooms. This is a conceptual of the plan as of 2016 and current conceptual plan. Very little has changed since the original concept drawings. This is from the 90% plans, and I'm going to try to describe to you what we see here. You can see, I know it's oh wow, you can barely see that in that depiction, but the pathway goes, if you can follow the mouse, to the bottom of the hill. Each one of these lines represents a contour elevation. There's 1 foot of differential between each contour. You can see that it has a constant grade from the top of the hill all the way to the harbor. And the reason for that is to ensure that we have ADA accessibility. And it also creates a harbor view from the highway. The elements you see here are underground retention to meet our water quality standard for the site. I know it's going to be very difficult to see in this depiction. I'm going to go back to this slide. There's a 2.5-foot wall, if you can follow the cursor, that's proposed along the pathway. There's also a 3-foot wall proposed along the property line to the west, and that creates a terracing. On this drawing, if you can again follow the mouse, currently there's a 12-inch water line that runs in a 20-foot easement, a Destin water users easement, that goes to the harbor, under the harbor, to Holiday Isle. With this design, that water line will have to be lowered, and that's also part of the plans here. And again, follow the mouse. As we go down the hill, we come to a fork, and to the left, we'd start to go back up in grade to the top of the structure, the bathroom structure here. This is approximately 10 feet above the grade here at the bottom of the hill. And please, if you have any questions, ask them as I go. If you have any questions regarding anything that I'm describing.
I got a question, Mayor.
Go ahead.
It's about the road you're talking about going down. You was talking about it just a few minutes ago, being ADA compliance.
Yes.
That is going to be taking out a considerable amount of that bluff where the road is now to get that grade.
It'll actually start taking grade out starting at the top of the hill.
Right, but where the bluff starts dropping off to go down to the bottom of the hill, right now currently is pretty well level with the adjacent property, and you're talking about putting a 5-foot wall and a 3-foot wall in there?
That's correct.
8-foot drops, that's taking about 8 foot of that bluff out, is that correct?
That's correct. No, you're exactly right. Currently, there's a roadway that goes down the hill as well.
Correct.
So it's not quite following the contour of that roadway, and that roadway is probably 15 to 20 foot wide. This pathway here is 15 foot wide.
Why couldn't we, why wasn't it designed not to take out those large trees?
Well, as I proceed, I think maybe I'll answer some of those questions.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me ask, if I could interrupt for one more question. Sure. The city of Destin was awarded a grant to build this park, and the grant came with specifications. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Came with specifications, and these designs this design was put together to meet those specifications for the grant. Is that correct?
I think that the concept of the park was put together to address those specifications. Now, the physical elements, some of the physical elements weren't specific in that grant. I think what we're the ADA requirement, having a consistent pathway down to the hill for ADA is just a matter of the park, as a matter of having ADA accessibility to the park.
Excuse me, Councilman, I think I have one more question. Councilmember Ramsell.
I have a question. You mentioned that you had to, the design called for the water line to be lowered.
Yes.
how much lower than it already is the call for it to be lowered, and is that a difference from earlier plans?
No. The actual design of the water line was not on any other plans. We always knew that the water line had to be lowered, but the actual design of lowering that just recently occurred. And to answer your question, how low does it have to be? It has to be 3 foot lower than the proposed grade at a minimum.
So it's because of the grading that it has to be lowered, not because of anything else?
That's correct.
And that is the line that currently exists on the easement?
That's correct. On a 20-foot wide Destin water user's easement.
Okay. I have further questions, but I'm going to formulate them and let you continue.
Okay.
Thanks.
This is a depiction of the demolition and tree removal plan in the 90% drawings. The X's represent trees that are to be removed. And the next slide is an aerial that'll be easier to understand. Numbers 1, 2, and 4 are the large trees that are to be preserved on the site. And there's a 30-inch live oak, an 18-inch live oak, and a 30-inch laurel oak. Trees 6, 7, and 8 are trees adjacent to the site that are to be protected. Trees 9 through 13 are trees that need to be removed because of construction.
If I may, we say trees 6, 7, and 8 are to be protected. What measures are we taking to protect them?
I'll get that. That's a little later on in the presentation. And this is just a picture we took of those trees. It's about an 8 to 10-inch magnolia tree. And this is about a 12-inch oak tree, and behind it is a 16-inch cypress tree. You can't see that cypress real well in this photograph, so I took one here. That's the cypress tree to be removed. These are the trees to be preserved on site. There's a 30-inch and an 18-inch live oak. And there's also another live oak that's on the property line that will be preserved as well. This is the 30-inch laurel oak that is near the property line with the fleet that's to be preserved. These are the protected trees on the adjacent property, which is Dewey Destin's restaurant. Number 6 is a 46-inch live oak. And number 7 is a 38-inch live oak. The other tree on the property is a 20-inch live oak, and that's the one here coming out of the roof. As part of the project, we required Tetra Tech to hire an arborist to make the recommendations on how to protect and to preserve the trees here on site. Generally speaking, the tree has a critical protection zone, and it's based off the diameter. And what the arborist says here is 1-inch diameter equals 1 foot of critical protection zone. So for instance, a 30-inch tree would have a 30-foot protection zone from the trunk of the tree all the way around the tree. So pre-construction, he recommends applying a root zone humus inside the critical protection zone. And as it was described to me, that would help generate new root growth. During construction for these protected trees, he recommends doing and I'll get to the next slide, but that describes it a little more in depth, that we need to monitor and inspect the CPZs weekly by the certified arborists and follow the root pruning recommendations and water it, the equivalent of 1 inch of rainfall per week. In post-construction, we need to monitor the trees for the next 3 years. Specifically, the large trees that are near the property line on Dewey Destin's restaurant. He pointed out for the 38 and the 46-inch trees that they're 23% within the critical protection zone. And he goes on to describe the trees that the tree healths appear nominal, and they may be considered stressed at the moment. The same with the 20-inch. Now, he describes here what needs to be done during construction, and he says you need to retain as much of the critical protection zone as possible. And the way they do that, they'll air prune, or excuse me, they'll air excavate near the roots, and so there'll be no digging. And any root under 3 inches are to be sawed or to be pruned and not ripped with an excavator. He also goes on to say that that tree number 8, which is the tree closest to the property line, that there should be no cutting of those roots within 4 foot of the tree. So under the current design, there's a retaining wall that is shown next to the property line. So following the arborist's report, that design would have to be modified to move further away from the trunk of that tree. And again, the 90% plans that has been submitted to the city have not gone through technical review by the city of Destin. They had a pre-application meeting several months ago, and it has not yet been submitted for official review by the city and by all the other technical review members, such as Destin water users, the fire department, any of the typical review process that we normally go through for a development order. This is a perspective to give you an idea of what the grading will be like. You'll see where my cursor is the top of the hill is Highway 98, and it has a constant grade down the hill. And you can see here on the west property line how it's going to be graded up to meet the existing grade to the west. You can see the retaining wall here that is proposed along the property line. So this actually shows you the terracing that I described earlier. This is a view from the harbor. And again, in the forefront is the proposed bathrooms and resource center for the museum. And actually, where you see that number 5 is one of the locations of a protected tree, or preserved tree. This is the current view from the harbor, looking up the hill, looking up the driveway. This is a perspective or a rendering of what it may look like when we're finished. So again, we'd have this retaining wall here, and then the building will essentially go where that retaining wall is. And lastly, the floor plans for the building. We have here the bathrooms, which are definitely a requirement of the grant, as well as the resource room here for the museum. And with that, I'd love to entertain any questions you may have. And I do have I do have the ability to put the construction drawings up here. So if you have anything specific on the construction drawings.
Councilmember Destin?
Thank you, Mayor. On the bathroom drawings, where do we propose to place a lift station? Because for some reason, we've decided that the bathrooms will be at the bottom of the bluff.
That's right.
Where are we we have to pump the sewage back up the hill to get to the sewer pipe up on 98.
Right.
Where do we propose to put that?
I'm getting there. That lift station's right here. See the cursor?
Mm-hmm.
So it's essentially in front of that building, south of that building.
Is that still on our property?
That's on city property, correct?
Yeah, okay. I don't know. It just seems to me that we wouldn't need a lift station, and we might save ourselves $100,000 by not having to have a lift station by placing the bathrooms back up on top of the bluff. Let Ms. Ramswell talk.
Councilmember Ramswell?
Thanks. Okay. I have a few questions, and there's really no order to them. If you could go back to the tree slide, I believe that was slide...
This one.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the page number for council reference, too. On this particular slide, I noticed that the trees on the far left, down by the water, there's 3 palms there, are not marked. If you go back one slide where it shows demolition and tree removal,
Right.
those 3 trees appear to be marked for demolition.
And they will be.
Okay, but they're not listed on this list of removing trees.
Right. That was just an oversight on my part.
Okay. So now I'd like to go forward to the slide. I guess it's one of the latter slides where you've got the view of the restrooms and the facility from the harbor. Yes, any of those would work.
This one?
Yes, that's good. So that's apparently going to be an overlook, and I can see in the plans that you've provided, it does appear as if there's some sort of railing, at least on the west side of that. What is going on the right side? It looks like it's just a cliff.
There'll be a railing all the way around it.
Okay. Now, in this picture you're showing right now, I see cars right there to the right.
Right.
What is that?
That's the Fleet's property.
Okay, because that's my next question, is that if you go back to the beginning of the slides again, sorry, if you look at the 13 and the 16, which you commented, of course, very little has changed, all of a sudden when we get to the grading plan, there's parking, but it's not on our property.
Correct.
Has that been removed? Because some of these slides still show that parking.
Now, that parking is going to be part of the plans. And
This parking that's down on to the east of our property line?
yes. And I have another exhibit I'd like to show you to describe why.
Okay, how can we have parking located on someone else's property?
That's actually not our parking. Where's that folder? Let me zoom in a little bit. I don't know how well you can see that. I'll zoom in a little bit more. again, follow the cursor, what you'll see underneath is the existing parking. There's a parking space here located on the park property, the fleet property, a parking space here, a half a parking space here, and a half a parking space there. By virtue of building this park, it's going to make those essentially unusable. So what we have here proposed is to make use of that space and put parking there. The parking, and I'm glad you brought that up. Earlier this year, we went to community development to get a determination on the requirement for on-site parking. When this project started back in 13, when we started the concept of it, the determination of the Community Development Department at that time was that we didn't need on-site parking because we're in the multimodal district. We built this 146 space public parking, and that would be sufficient for this project. Well, like I said earlier this year, we asked the Community Development Department to make a determination on that parking, and they determined that we do indeed need on-site parking. We need 3 spaces. We need a handicap space and 2 other spaces located on-site. So what we asked the consultants to do is to try to come up with a modification to these 90% drawings that would show on-site parking before it actually went for development order review. And we're currently working with the fleet property, the property to the east, to see if we can get access from their property onto the city property to make as little impact as possible to this design. So that's where we are currently regarding parking.
Okay. My concern is it sounds like there's negotiations occurring with an outside business or individual or whomever, and at least while I've been on council, I don't think that's something that we've approved or discussed. City manager, do you have any insight?
It would certainly be something that you would have to approve.
Absolutely.
But let me go ahead and answer this. When it was determined by the Community Development Department that we were going to have on-site parking, and we looked at many different ways that we could have done that, none of them were acceptable because the ingress-egress would have been on the park property. So what we did is that we contacted the fleet, and we asked them if they would be agreeable to allow the ingress and egress from their property, not to use their parking lot, but to simply have that come in and out. The most basic conversation was that the fleet would be willing to work with the city to help us accommodate an ingress and egress to parking spaces that would be on our property. And that's as far as it goes. Mr. Campbell is right. We could not enter into any kind of negotiation or any kind of agreement without it first coming to the council for review and approval. We've only had preliminary discussions to figure out the best way to solve this problem. Another way to solve the problem, which we have discussed in depth with the Community Development Department, is changing the code language, because it actually does not make sense for us to require parking in neighborhood parks. The fact that, for example, and I'm going to use your example, Mr. Foreman, in Cal Air, they have neighborhood parks that are supposed to be used for the neighborhood to promote walking and biking, and there's parking surrounding it. the idea that in a multimodal city, we require parking in neighborhood parks really doesn't make sense. So that is another option that the City Council could choose to go forward with if they wish, is to allow staff to change the code so that parking is not required in neighborhood parks where the main intent is for people to walk or bike to there, such as the Heritage Park down on the harbor. It was built specifically so that people would walk through the park to the harbor, the gateway for the harbor. So those are the two options that we're looking at right now. If the council prefers that we have the on-site parking and we received permission from council, we would then enter into a negotiation with the fishing fleet to see if we could come forward with agreement. If not, then that option closes, and then the only other option would be for the council to allow us to bring back a change to the code, removing the requirement for on-site parking in neighborhood parks. I hope I adequately explained that for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, while I appreciate your industriousness and staff's industriousness and problem solving and trying to look at things, I mean, we're already involved in one lawsuit with this property. I think something of this serious of a nature, personally, sitting on council, I would have liked to have heard this is what's risen, this is an issue we need to address, and then, you know, have some discussion with council and determine possible actions. The idea of trying to, well, I'm not going to go there considering we've got an open lawsuit, but my concern is utilizing someone's property and then being placed in the position of owing a favor, so to speak. It bothers me, and I think that's something that would bear discussion. My other concern is, was this plan, I know Mr. Campbell had just stated that this has not gone before the Technical Review Committee, but wasn't it presented earlier this summer to the Land Community Trust?
It was presented at 60% to find out if there were any issues or concerns that they had going forward that we needed to then add or change going forward to a 90% plan. One of the things that comes to mind is I know that there were some questions regarding the History Fishing Museum, and we were not going to be able to put a fishing history museum on it as the original 2010 plan had said. We went to them, Ms. Kathy Marla-Blue came with us. We showed them the alternative, which was the educational area that you just saw, and being able to do museum displays and a series of educational workshops throughout the year, and they accepted that as well. At that meeting, they also made comments to our city engineer regarding showing stormwater retention and stormwater flow, and I believe the water main at that time. So there was a lot of give and take, and we came back. Tetra Tech was there at the table with us, our engineer of project, so that Tetra Tech was then able to take all of those comments and go back to create the 90% plan. We are still working on that 90% plan because, as Mr. Campbell stated, we've not yet taken it to the review by planning department. It's not at that stage yet. And just to reiterate, there has been no discussion or agreement as far as doing anything with any other property. It was merely reaching out and asking, would you be willing to work with the city on an ingress-egress? And the answer was yes. Anything that we would discuss beyond that would, of course, come before council. There's no deals being made. There's no favors being owed. We're merely asked them a question. Would you be willing to allow us to use your ingress egress? And they said that is something we would consider and talk about. we would have brought that back to council before anything further would have happened.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. But with that said, I think this is something that maybe might have benefited from a council discussion and direction. What are I was under the impression, and perhaps that's from minutes from other meetings, or I can't recall if it was said here, but that the meeting with the land trust this summer was to go over the 90% plans and that they were complete except for the final 10%. Now, you had mentioned talking about the fishing museum. I have copies of all the annual stewardship reports, and that was reported to them back, I believe, in 2014. So it's interesting that things that appear to have already been done are being rehashed, and this whole project has bothered me.
David, the meeting that we attend with the FCT in Tallahassee, that was with 60% plans, correct?
That was the 60% plans,
That was 60% plans, ma'am.
Good. One other thing I wanted to go over, and that was the discussion on the cutting in the bluff, which I believe you had decided was around 8 feet. One of the requirements listed within the restrictive covenants, actually in section 7, item 2, it says, "Do not cause harm to natural resources." Isn't cutting 8 foot of bluff pretty significant?
Again, that was not a concern at our 60%, drawing meeting with the state.
But it would be now, correct? Because, I mean, that restrictive covenant is still in place, and that would be something that they would look at, I would believe.
Sure, that restricted covenant was in place when we had the meeting of the 60% drawings.
Okay.
They had the construction drawings, the 60% construction drawings, and they reviewed them, and that wasn't a concern that they had.
Did they realize how much was going to be cut out of the bluff? Because I thought you said that this was a new development due to the grading in the 90% plan, which they hadn't seen.
This grading plan has been here since the 30% plans.
Okay, I'm going to stop for a while and let other council speak. Thank y'all.
You're welcome.
Mr. Foreman?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of points. I believe in the original grant, the way that it was written indicated that it was almost entirely a pedestrian park. And when you get into the issue of having parking spaces for some reason that I haven't figured out yet, that wouldn't serve any purpose, any useful purpose, when we have a huge parking lot across the street that was built for that purpose, it makes no sense to me that we're going to try to put in parking spaces in a pedestrian park when you can do what the city manager indicated, that we'll make a modification to the land description in there. I think, to me, that makes more sense than trying to work out a lateral agreement with an adjacent property owner. Although that is something that's done frequently to improve the efficiency of parking, is that you have adjacent property owners agree to share access back and forth, but that's not the case here, so that's all I had to say.
Councilmember Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. Does the council, are we going to have to approve the 100% drawings before it's actually built?
I think that we will bring these back to council, and especially with some of the challenges that we're having with the parking issue. And I'm not quite sure if approval is the the technical term. Of course, you have the say-so on the project, but it's not a requirement of the land development code, is what I'm trying to say.
So this park could actually be constructed regardless of what the council has to say?
Not at all. Not at all.
No, and that is absolutely not our intent, sir. I have the discretion to bring things forward to council that do not require your approval based on any land development code or even the charter. But I do bring things forward to you when I understand that there is council interest. And of course, there is a huge amount of interest in this particular project. I did an extensive amount of research over the weekend because, again, I came in halfway through the movie. And understanding that this started back in 2006, and then it actually wasn't designed conceptually for construction until 2013, and the fact that this went to the CRA board, which of course is also the council, several times, and several times the CRA board approved it and gave direction to staff. There was never direction by the CRA board to bring it forward to council through all of that time, and there was no requirement in our land development codes to bring it to council. However, we are very happy to bring this to council now to get your input and your feedback. And when we have it at 100%, I will bring it back to you again. But it's still, we're still in the process. It still hasn't gone to the planning department yet. They haven't had their TRC review, so there may be other issues involved that we have to tweak or fix or remedy before we even hit that 100%. So it's still in the process.
Okay, thank you. So there's no other way to get in compliance with the ADA other than basically cutting this bluff out and putting a walkway down through there?
No, I think there are other ways to achieve ADA compliance. I think with the, again, the engineer's concept of this, which has gone through the committees and to the boards, the idea that not only was this going to meet ADA, a 15-foot wide pathway, but was also going to give a vista from US Highway 98, something that is very rare along Highway 98, is to be able to see the harbor from the roadway. So I think that was the thinking behind this. There's certainly other ways to do it. You're exactly right. But this was the direction that, that we were tasked with, so we proceeded.
Don't we, I've been told we have like $160,000 invested in this design so far? Is that accurate?
I'd have to, I'd hate to give you an exact number without double checking, but that may be close.
It's just, I mean, it baffles me that we got that kind of money invested in it, and then all of a sudden we find out we need parking and trying to squeeze some parking in somewhere.
If I can interject on that, sir, if you don't mind? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the property was purchased in 2006, and they didn't start doing schematic conceptuals until 2013. In June of 2013, there was questions posed by an adjacent property owner. So it didn't progress much more further than that. In March of 2013, the funds were dedicated to go ahead and go forward with the design, and that's how we got to the 60%, and then we just stopped. It just stayed there. So it's just recently, when I got here in July of 2017, that we realized that the Restore Act money is coming. We had an annual report we had to do to the FCT, and there had been no forward movement made on this park in 7 or 8 years. So we were being questioned as to what is the intent of this park. And referring back to the declaration of restrictive covenants that Councilwoman Ramswell brought up, they were very specific that it was only for the conservation, protection, and enhancement of natural and historical resources and for compatible passive natural resource-based public outdoor recreation, and that it was only for the proposed uses in the project site plan, in the management plan approved by the FCT. There was a concern that it was being used as a parking lot, which did not meet our restrictive covenants. So that's when I came forward and I said, the money's here, we need to finish the design and we need to secure the property to be ready for construction. And the council voted to give us permission to secure the park by putting a fence around it. And that's how we have now gotten to this point. The project has been approved through the county's multi-year plan, and we've actually done the submittal directly to Treasury through the county for the actual funds to now flow down. That's where we are right now.
Okay, thank you. I would really like to see, I'd really like to see another way to get in compliance with ADA, other than cutting this bluff down, moving that concrete driveway, walkway further to the east to get it away from the adjacent property, from their oak trees. And I agree with Mr. Destin. I'd like to see the bathrooms back up on top of the hill and not down on the bottom. But that's just my input. That's all I have, Mayor.
My screen is not clearing, so any council member wants the floor, just speak out. I'll grant you the floor. Council Member Marler.
Okay. Let me try to get a handle on this. As far as the ADA compliancy, you really don't have a lot of choice. You can do switchbacks or you can do the grade, I believe, if I'm correct. And Mr. Campbell, you can explain how the grade starts? I think it's like per foot, something like that.
You can go 30 feet on a 1 in 12 slope without a landing. So,
yeah, the 1 in 12 was the question, because I remember doing something. There are alternatives, of course. There's lifts that can be designed, but they tend not work very well in salt air. I'm privy to that at Harbor Walk. We have some there on the main building at Emerald Grand, and we've replaced it 3 times due to the elements. I think part of the problem is that we've had several council changeouts since the original purchase and the original ideas, and so interjecting a lot of different things and questions. I've kind of been here the whole time when we purchased the land, and also, except for the time the 4 years I was out of office, I believe. We've got a quagmire of some sort, because we still have a current lawsuit, of course, going with that. But having a 90% drawing, even if it changes a little bit, is not bad. And the reason for the bathrooms to be where they're at, we want people to walk the harbor. So it's probably better if it's closer to the boardwalk than, in my opinion, than it is to put it up at the top of the hill where it's where everybody's asking it to be. Plus, it serves a multi-purpose because you're going to have a little stage area, a viewing area where you can overlook the harbor. But part of the problem has been that we want people to walk that harbor, so that's why the restrooms are closer to the boardwalk than they are to the top of the hill. The parking issue for the thing, again, I think that's an ADA requirement. I mean, unless you want the person and the walker to be walking across the crosswalk on 98 in the middle of the summer, it ain't going to work because it's a lot slower and that light's not going to stay there forever. So when we look at all of those ideas, that's why I understand the parking issue, because I think we had to do the same thing at the park at Crystal Beach. We had to have the parking, the handicap parking is right next to the pavilion, so there's less of a walk for the handicapped. Am I correct on that, Mr. Campbell?
I don't think you were here when we originally did that part.
That's correct. Like I said, our code does require that.
And a little history, and I think Mr. Destin, the elder, can remember this. When we built this building, it was not ADA compliant, and we actually had some serious issues that the architect forgot to add in that we had to come back and do at that time to make this ADA, to make the original City Hall ADA compliant. And the original City Hall, I'm sorry, not this building. And then, of course, what we've had to do to this building is continue with the compliancy. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
Any further discussion by council?
I have a question, Mr. Campbell. When you look at the shot from the harbor looking north where you can see the actual building and the slope, could we not do a switchback or some sort of L ramp for ADA here at the end that wouldn't require cutting? That would take them up to like the roof access, so they would actually have both ways to go?
I'm not exactly clear on what you're asking, but from an engineer's perspective, I think that there are many possibilities on meeting ADA requirements.
Okay. And it was interesting because I was going back through and actually looking at the grant and the application, and you had talked about, they had discussed, the city manager, you had discussed how the community trust folks had actually mentioned the fact that, talking about it being used as a parking lot. And I thought it was interesting because in the actual grant application, it says portions of the site are currently used for overflow parking for the adjacent Fisherman's Co-op. So I thought it was interesting that that actually had been written into the grant application. So
It was to show what the property currently was being used for, but in the restrictive covenants, that was something that was not acceptable if we were going to go forward with the park project.
in referring to the restrictive covenants again, is the removal of trees something that has been discussed with them, especially as it relates to harming natural resources and the environment?
I think the discussion that we had with the state in Tallahassee earlier in 2017 was that they were aware that there were going to be some trees that needed to be removed, and that we were making every effort to preserve the, for lack of a better word, heritage trees that are located on and near the site.
Thank you for bringing this to us tonight. It was nice to actually get some of this visual, which is the first time I've seen a rendering of this nature. So it was very helpful to see. Thank you all for pulling that together. My only request, and I'm not sure if the rest of the council agrees, but this situation has become so contentious and there's so many moving pieces that I think it would be a good idea to run things that might be a problem or things you might be considering by council and save some steps and perhaps some expense.
I think I'm back running again.
Respond to this. The difficulty has been that this has transcended 3 different councils. And you've got March coming up, and you're going to change some people again, maybe. At least you're going to change me.
Well, but going from 60 to 90.
I think the problem has been that I'm hearing the same questions come up from year to year to year. And it doesn't seem like we're getting to that point. I mean, if we can get to 90%, that still leaves 10% that you can work with. And it shows progress, and I think what we really want on this thing is to be concluded, that it should take place. And we're rapidly approaching the point that we don't even remember what the original question was. And so
I agree with you, with council's approval.
60 to 90 requires, I think, council to look at it and agree.
Councilmember Morgan.
When's the last time this was brought before the Harbor Board, the CRA Advisory Board? The last time city staff brought it forward to them for discussion? Because it seems like there's a lot of details here that are yet to be ironed out. You know, I have a hard time believing this is 90% done when we're still discussing the bathrooms, the fishing museum, the parking spots. Those seem like three crucial components to the park. But
Yes, sir. September 10th of 2014, 60% plans went before the Harbor CRA Advisory Committee. It was approved with the understanding that further adjustments may be made to the plan without coming back to the Harbor CRA Advisory Committee for approval. At that meeting, there was no recommendation for it to go forward to the CRA. However, it did go before the CRA board on October 7th, 2013. They approved the schematic conceptual plan and the work order for us to go forward with the final design. So the last time that the CRA saw it was October 2013. The last time that the Harbor CRA Advisory Committee saw it at 60% plans was in September of 2014. The next time that it came before anyone was City Council after a non-binding mediation with BI Inc. Did not come to fruition, and there was a direction to explore exchange of easements between the city and BI Inc. And then it came back before the council again January 19th, 2016, March 7th, 2016, and then July 18th, 2016. The plans during all of those discussions remained at the 60% that was approved in 2014 because of the other issues that were being discussed.
okay. Thank you. I think I've had 3 members of that board approach me with somewhat of a feeling of frustration that we went from 60 to 90, and I think these changes were, you know, I'm not too familiar with the 60% plans, but I think there's a general feeling that our chosen representatives of the Harbor CRA are feeling left out of this process. I think Preble's frustration comes through a general feeling of having been left out of this process, at least for the past year, which is why we had to request staff to bring it to us, which I think was probably the result of, you know, some members of the CRA advisory board being a bit disgruntled about the way this process is working. I think personally, myself, I think some council members as well, and probably a majority of the CRA advisory board feels like there's a lack of transparency here. I'm not saying there is. I just think that the way this has been handled has created that sense, and these are real concerns that my appointed representative to the Harbor CRA board's brought to me. So, you know, I'm tempted, with all the details it seems that need to be worked out, I'm tempted to have it kicked back to them and have them look at it, and that's their job, just like the tree ordinance and the tree board.
If that's a motion, I'll second it.
Yeah, I'll make that motion. To have the CRA Harbor Advisory Board take another hard look at this.
And if I may just address some of what you just stated, sir, there is no lack of transparency. This project didn't move until July 18th of 2017. It was stopped dead in the water between 2014 and 2017. Sure. And then at July of 2017 is when city staff was given the direction to go ahead and do the 90%. Sure. And we didn't receive the final 90% until just before Christmas.
Okay.
So there is no lack of transparency here, sir.
That's a pretty quick turnaround. And I wasn't accusing you of it. I said there's a general feeling that, you know, there is a lack of transparency. I didn't accuse you, I just... Excuse me?
I don't share your feeling.
You don't? Well, 3 members, sure.
Because the information has been right in front of you the whole time. And if you wanted to look at it, just like the opportunity to bring it forth tonight, and we are in fact discussing it tonight, and I don't know how much more transparent you can get.
I have a question to build, and I'm not trying to call anyone out. I'm just trying to clear up concerns that I have. I have plans that were presented to me as the 90% plans, and they're dated July 2017.
Yes, ma'am, those things were in a Dropbox to the council back in July. It's been available to you. September, we told you it was available to you, and in November, we told it was available to you. So you've had it since July in a Dropbox.
Okay, so then my follow-up question is, didn't you just say that we didn't get these till right before Christmas?
No, we didn't
At
get what you're
90%?
looking at, the actual conceptual schematics, all of these. We didn't get this.
The distinction being the schematics as opposed to the conceptual drawings.
Right, the conceptual drawings are still being reviewed. That's what we were able to go to the planning department, not as a formal TRC review, but asking the questions, are there any concerns with this? And that's when the whole parking issue came up. So since those became available, we've been working, trying to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row just to be able to go to TRC. So as you can see from what we showed you tonight, we're not even ready to go to TRC with this yet.
Thank you for clarifying that.
I think we're getting off of the motion. We have a motion and a second on the floor, and limit discussion to the specific motion at this point. Any further discussion on the motion?
Was the motion actually seconded?
Yes, it was seconded. I believe Councilmember Rams will second it. Any further discussion? Yeah, would you please repeat the motion?
To have this kicked back to the Harbor CRA Advisory Board for them to take a look at this and iron out some of the problems we've been discussing tonight, which are clearly there.
You want to specifically list those problems you want them to consider?
Yeah, what problems are you wanting?
Parking, restrooms, ADA compliance, shaving the bluff, the lift station, the requirements of the lift station.
You view it as a problem, I view it as
Then vote no. Then vote no. That's the beauty of
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Lejeune, the restrooms, the lift station, the viewing section, the meeting room, all of those were in the 60% plan, almost identical as it is now, and those were all approved by the board. The only thing I don't know that was not approved by them was the 3 parking spaces.
Right, at this point, the thing that gave us the surprise was the parking spaces, because we had a previous opinion from a planning department that are no longer here that parking was not required. And when we had the current planning department look at it, they interpreted the code that, yes, absolutely, the parking is required. And I don't want to interrupt the judicial process, sir, but I do have a list that I pulled from the discussion, is that the council is looking for alternate compliance for ADA, possibly bathrooms at the top of the hill. I don't know if there's a consensus for that yet, and a path moved further to the east away from the adjacent property to the west. So if these are all things that we then will put into the agenda for direction to your advisory committee to look at, because that's the process. If you want your advisory committee to look at something and come back with recommendations, we need to tell them exactly what it is you're asking them to come back with recommendations for. So if those are the items, or if there are additional items that the council wants the advisory committee to look at.
Mayor. Ms. Lejeune?
Yes, sir.
That was a good list. I would add that I really don't want to see those 3 trees in the middle, the magnolia, the oak, or the cedar to be removed. The pathway could be split around them, we can come up with clever ways and not have to lose the trees.
So to get the motion clear, the additions that Ms. Lejeune added, the additions that Mr. Morgan added, and the addition you just added, that's the additions to the original motion? Correct. Is that accurate?
Councilmember Morgan, will you accept those?
I do.
The second stands.
Second stands. Jeff, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, she seconded. I have a question, Mayor.
Yes.
Do you have a time frame on this, Mr. Morgan, for them to come back? Because we're looking at less than 90 days, there's going to be an election, and there may not be the same faces up here. There may be the same faces up here. I don't want to keep going over this over and over every time we can change council members.
In due course.
Okay.
Again, I'm still partially locked up. Does any other council member wish to speak on this subject? We have one member of the audience would like to speak. Would you like to hear that before you vote on this, or is that out of order?
You should, Mayor, because this is an on-agenda discussion, and
this is going to have to be a supermajority.
Oh well, was there a blue card for this?
Yes.
Item? I would.
Well, actually, it's part of the public comments, but I was going to move it up to this, but I did not have this when we approved the agenda.
I'd recommend that.
Okay. Is this going to require a supermajority when we do vote?
No.
Okay. Mr. Destin, would you like to speak now?
Dewey Destin, 777 Spring Lake Drive. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you on the park. I was just going to have some comments about the trees, and I see that the staff does have in this report that they were going to try to take some actions to mitigate the impact on the trees on our property. However, I think that those actions are not far enough or active enough. I would point out that in the report it said that the trees may be considered stressed. So I hired another arborist. Now I've got two opinions. Neither of those arborists said the trees were or may be stressed. They both said that they were healthy and not stressed. So I would just want to clarify that part of the debate. The way that bluff is going to be cut down, it appears you're going to send that back for discussion, but it's going to be almost impossible to protect those trees, particularly the tree that's on the property line. That one's 4 feet from the actual property line. If you go with the 46-foot diameter conservation zone, then approximately 18 feet of it are over onto the city's property, and in that area, the cut down on the bluff is pretty severe, and those roots would all be destroyed. Let me just skip over to the handicap parking issue. I'm here to tell you that we have directed our attorneys to remove any portion of our lawsuit that would cause the opening of the easement or our use of the easement. As you know, we have our own easement now. So I want you to understand that we stand ready to provide handicap parking for you. You need 2 spaces, we'll give it to you. No strings attached. So I'm kind of disappointed that you've not contacted us to talk to us about parking, but we still stand ready to work with the city to make the park what it should be. After all, we're debating about a neighborhood park. This is the biggest public works project this city has been involved in, or one of the biggest. When you put in the $4.6 million we paid for it, along with the several million that we're trying to get to develop it, we're at almost $7 million. A neighborhood park that we're going to spend $7 million on, I would think the state might be aghast to find that it's a neighborhood park by definition, which is only available to the neighbors, since we have invested so much money that belongs to the entire state of Florida, and now also the BP money. So we need to make this park something more than that. And we are still ready to work with you on the amenities. I saw that in the park plan, there's a kayak launch ramp that's supposed to be tying into the kayak trail that goes from the state line on toward Apalachicola. but there is no kayak launch ramp in your 60% drawing. There is no parking for a kayak boat ramp, launch ramp. There is no access to bring the kayaks down to the water's edge. We would be happy to work with the city to fix those problems. There are a number of other issues we could work with you on. And as we invited in the past, we invite you again to work with us to make this park more than a neighborhood park. It's supposed to be a park for all of the state of Florida. Thanks.
Thank you for your offer and your comments.
Mayor, would it be okay if I addressed Mr. Destin?
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Destin, thank you so much for coming forward, sir. And absolutely, there was no slight meant to yourself. My understanding is that there still is active litigation. There's been motions made, but there's been no conclusion to any of that. Once the lawsuit is complete and done, sir, we'll be happy to sit down and speak to you about anything that you want to do to help us with the park.
Yep.
So please, I hope you didn't take it personally that we didn't talk to you. It was my impression that we're still under a lawsuit.
Well, I would point out to you that the lawsuit is not about the design of the park or the existence of the park. The lawsuit was about the easement. And hopefully that part's going to go away, and then we will be capable, I hope, of helping you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion by council?
I have a question, but it's sort of attached to something that the city manager brought up. So if we want to go ahead and do the vote on this, whatever your preference.
If it's not on this subject, let's stick with the motion in the second and vote on that first. If I've not seen any further discussion, last shot, I call for the vote. I'm sorry. I'm still locked up. There we go. Five yes, one abstain, one no. Motion passes.
And Mr. Dixon, just can you state your reason?
Yes, my wife works for a company that's part of this lawsuit, and my daughter works for a law firm that is part of this lawsuit.
So my side question was, you had brought up something about the parking and the fact that originally it wasn't required, and then a new review or something found that it was. Was it something in our comprehensive plan that caused that to change, or can you illuminate?
No, ma'am. From my understanding, it was the interpretation of the code by the previous community development director.
Okay, thank you.
Ray, I'm sorry, I'm still closed down. Should we just continue using this? Do you think we're working? Okay. Okay, yes, see, there's no public comments, no cards turned in. Did anyone fail to turn in a card that would like to speak tonight on the agenda items? If not, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back and move to item number 6, public hearings. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll start toward your seats, we'll try to bring the meeting back into session. Council members, if I can get everyone back here, I'd like to restart the meeting. If everyone will please find a seat, the meeting's back in session. We have first reading of ordinance 1723. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Ms. Lejeune, I forgot you 2 weeks in a row.
That's okay, sir. I don't have any long-born reports. I just have a few announcements to make. I just wanted to remind everyone that we are having a Crab Island workshop January 8th. This is this coming Monday. At 5 p.m. at the community center. The county commission and our city council are invited, as are all the stakeholders, and it's just to discuss some possible issues that we have with Crab Island and how we can improve the safety and the experience for the visitors. Also, our Business Tax Receipt Equity Study Commission meeting will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. here in the annex. That is a committee appointed by council, and it is in the sunshine. Anyone who would like to stop by and observe the meeting is welcome. City facilities will be closed on Monday, January 15th for Martin Luther King holiday, so our next council meeting will be on Tuesday, January the 16th. And then just a reminder that the short-term rental task force meetings are held every Wednesday at 3 o'clock at City Hall, in the City Hall boardroom. And they're making tremendous progress, sir. You'll be very pleased with the recommendations. And that's all I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we'll move to number 6. First reading of ordinance 1723 LC. Tree preservation and protection.
Ordinance number 17-23-LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to tree preservation and protection, providing for amendment to Section 3.00.01 definitions, providing for amendments to Section 12.04.00 landscape development, providing for the creation of a new Section 12.05.00 tree preservation, providing for applicability to real property and exceptions, providing for tree removal restrictions, providing for application and permit procedures and criteria for tree removal, relocations, and replacement of protected trees, providing for standards for replacement trees, providing for maintenance of replacement trees, providing for credit for existing trees, providing for landscape plan requirements as to trees, providing for tree protection during development, providing requirements for tree protective barriers, providing requirements for minimum tree density, providing for the establishment and use of the City of Destin tree protection and related expenses revenue account, providing for visual clearance along rights-of-way and site triangles at intersections, providing for violations, providing for mitigation of fines, providing for contract requirements, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. And this is here on first reading. It's a public hearing.
Ms. Lejeune, further explanation?
I would like to turn this over to our Community Development Director, Ms. Jennifer Breiler, for a brief summation.
Hi, thank you. It's Jennifer Bryla, Mayor, Councilman. At your request, we took this back to the LPA and provided them some revisions to remove the financial entity that would be reviewing and taking monies from homeowners, and then we also made some cleanup provisions through some of the language. So essentially, it's the same ordinance that you saw initially, but then we took your recommendations and took it back to LPA, and they approved it unanimously.
And the section that were actually removed, sir, regarding the fines, fees, and permitting, those will be coming back at second reading as Resolution 1802 and Resolution 1803.
Thank you. Again, this is a public hearing. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak at this time? Yes, sir. And as always, your name, your address for our recorded record.
Thank you. Larry Caesar. I live at 14 Indian Bayou Drive in Destin. And before I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Before I talk on the ordinance, the thought occurred to Jack and I that if there are any drainage swales in your park, that we could give you a recommendation for a good contractor. So, anyway, I do want to. I thank you for the opportunity to talk on the ordinance. I'm here to ask you not to approve this ordinance, not because I'm opposed to the principle upon which it is based, and not because I disagree with the objectives it seeks to achieve. The problem with the ordinance that is the manner in which it is written. Simply stated, it's too complex, it's too confusing, it's poorly organized, it's incomprehensible to anyone with reasonable intelligence. About a year ago, I attended a meeting chaired by Ms. A. Bear at the Tree Board, at which I, along with a few other citizens, provided what we believed were a lot of constructive criticism and a lot of feedback on how to make that document easier to comprehend for the average Joe. There was one theme from that meeting, and that was the unanimous conclusion that the Tree Board had admirable intentions, but that the product as written would not achieve the desired results because no one could be able to understand it from the point of view of the owners of single-family detached homes. So I've been through it again. Here's the list of comments that I gave the Tree Board. I brought those with me to look them over because it has been quite a long time. Sadly, after I've tried to read this, and it is very difficult just to get through it, you get to about page 15 out of 29 and your head will just simply explode. It's just, I think the efforts to try to make this understandable have been just sadly insufficient. So because this is impossible to comprehend, I think you'll have a difficult time trying to enforce this. The average homeowner is simply not going to know what to do. If I were to buy a new lot, I couldn't honestly tell you by reading this whether or not I would have to get a landscape plan approved before I could get a building permit. It's just too hard to understand. Jack and I both went over it the last couple of weeks. I think it needs a lot of work just to understand it, and from my point of view, I would send it back. If this is the best we can do, I think we got a big problem. Thank you very much.
Let me ask a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Ms. June and I discussed this week as well. Obviously, there's a lot in there that has to be there just out of legalese. It is a tough document. We discussed maybe the production of a small pamphlet that would try to simplify it for the public's understanding, yet still keep it in there. Would that satisfy most of your complaints?
I think if you were to produce a simple document that says, from the point of view of the average homeowner, here is what you can and cannot do, here's what you need permits for, here is what you don't need permits for, and so forth and so on. Yes, I think that would solve the problem. Most of this appears to be tailored towards the developers, and I noticed it did exclude golf courses, which was one of the main sticking points about a year ago. But my concern is for the average Joe. in the city will just not be able to, you'll just never be able to figure out what to do. It's just too complicated. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, I think that would be great.
Great, thank you.
I'll be glad to, if that's all, I'll be glad to make the recommended motion, and I'd like to make a comment after, if I could. I move that the City Council approve Ordinance 17-23-LC on first reading and direct staff to schedule a second reading for final adoption.
I have a motion, I have a second, and I think a third. And I'm sorry, I don't know, was there any other member of the public that wanted to speak? I cut that off a little fast.
Hi, my name's Jack McCain. I live at 15 Indian Bayou Drive in Destin. I'm not sure I want the city telling me what I can trim and what I can't on my property. If I plant a tree and it grows to 2 inches in diameter and I decide I don't want that tree there, I want to be able to cut it down without having to contact the city, without having to pay a fee, so that somebody will come out and tell me that yes or no, you can deal with that tree. Number two, you have a tree board, and nowhere in that ordinance did I see any place where if I disagree with that tree board, what's my recourse? Going back to the tree board? I don't think that's going to fly. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Council members, discussion?
Yes. Let me say that this has come up about maybe 10 times already since we've been dealing with this, and the fact is that the more we talk about this, the more people are clear cutting their land. Today, over the weekend on the street that I live on, cut down every tree, and I don't know why, for whatever reason, but I know it's not perfect, but I know we've got to do something. And that's why I'm supporting this ordinance tonight. There can always be fixes to these things once we get into them, once we figure out if there's fixes that need to be made, we can adjust it. But for now, I got to tell you, we've talked about this up here enough, and as I said, they're clear-cutting land right now. And I'm tired of it. And it is your trees. When you mentioned the 2-inch tree, I don't think that's governed here. You know, there is a size diameter that is covered here, and you know, I know that it's probably not the Republican way to say who can cut down what tree, but I say everybody gets to benefit from those trees. So, thank you.
Councilmember Morgan.
I have nothing. I understand your concerns about how convoluted this is, but if we could include in this motion first of all, isn't the burden going to be on the tree companies?
I'm sorry, sir, in what respect?
In violation of our tree ordinance. Won't it fall on the tree companies?
Or whoever cuts the tree down, yes, sir.
Yeah. So really the responsibility, if you as a homeowner need to cut down a tree in your front yard and you call Coastline Tree or any tree company, that's just one of the local ones I know, then the burden of violating our tree ordinance falls on them, not the homeowner. Am I correct? And that was one thing I specified when I sent this back to them. So if you want to cut down a tree, it's up to the tree companies, the arborists, to understand our tree ordinance. And for them to provide you a service, the burden is on them. And I think if we could have the city staff come up with that bulletin points, the brochure that you had mentioned, that'd be great. But we've had this in front of us too many times for me to vote no and send it back now. So,
just for clarification, a homeowner cuts down a 2-inch tree, which is one of the protected trees. It's the homeowner's responsibility to understand the law and follow it, correct?
Yes, sir, if he's the one cutting the tree.
Yeah.
Call the question, Mayor.
I'll call the question, but it just, yeah, diameter of the tree is 2 inches. No further discussion? I call the question. Five yes, 2 no. Motion passes. Second reading of ordinance 1729 PC.
Mayor,
sorry, read by the title, please, sir.
Before I read it, since the evidence is going to be essentially identical for both this item and the next item, correct? Could everyone who's going to testify go ahead and stand real quick? Ms. Briley, too, if you could. Do y'all swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay. And is everyone in agreement that the same evidence used in this reading can be used in the next bullet point item? And is that okay with council? Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So ordinance number 17-29-PC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending Comprehensive Plan 2020, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for the adoption of a small-scale amendment to the Comprehensive Plan future land use map to include a change in future land use designation of a parcel of land from Bay Estates to low-density residential, providing for incorporation into the Comprehensive Plan, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. And this is a quasi-judicial hearing and a public hearing. Staff can go first.
Thank you. This is, as you stated, 17-29-PC, which amends the future land use map. This is the second reading. The department received no letters of objection, so we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Should we go to public discussion now?
No, the applicant needs to present their portion.
Good evening. My name is Mark Seiner. I'm with Choctaw Engineering. We're the agent for the applicant. The applicant is here, and I think he wants to speak after me. Really, we don't have anything more to add to the discussion beyond what we already talked about at the last City Council meeting. We went to the Planning Commission. They recommended approval. We have a staff report that has a recommendation for that the application meets your comprehensive plan land development code, and we would just ask that you approve this rezoning and future land use change this evening. Thank you. Any questions?
Council, questions? Mr. Foreman.
Mayor, I'd like to make the recommended motion. I move that the Destin City Council adopt the proposed small-scale future land use map amendment provided for in Ordinance 17-29-PC on second reading.
Second.
I'll second it, Mayor.
And I have a motion, I have a second. Any further public discussion? Anyone else want to testify on this first?
Yeah, Mayor, we still have to finish the public hearing portion of it. And does the applicant also want to speak?
My name's Josh Riker. I'm the owner of the property in question tonight. Just wanted to go over a few things. It's nothing more than we've gone over in the past. I bought this property in good faith that I'd be given a fair shot to.
If you could you please speak up just a little bit? We're having a little trouble hearing you.
I bought this property in good faith that I'd get a fair deal coming up to try to split this property up. When once again, that I said before, is when I bought this, I put it contingent that I meet with the city and find out, if it's a viable solution to what I'm trying to do. When I had that meeting, I was told that everything I was doing made sense, and went forward with my contract. This is the second time I'm here, as many of you know. Just asking that, it's the second time I've had the support of the staff, second time I've had the support of the LPA, and I'm hoping that I can continue to get your support with this going through. I would also request if during the public comment, if I could have the ability to speak if I feel need be.
I believe that'll be fine.
And are you done, Mr. Riker?
Yes.
And the staff have anything else they want to add?
No.
And y'all can turn it over to public comment now.
Okay. Public comment? Anyone in the audience wish to speak? Yes, sir. Again, your name and address.
Thank you to the council and group. My name is Mike Rame, live in Destin at 619 Calhoun. Having an opportunity to see this piece of property, I know there's been a lot of discussion. I've been here, this is the third time for this over the last couple of years. I think this is a good project. I think this is going to be beneficial to the city. A lot of questions were questioned and answered. I think most of them have been discernibly, correctly assessed by this council. I think you're going to provide us with the right action in this. I do think it's important to realize that this is something beneficial. I know some comments were made about secondary living areas. I have myself observed several approved projects here in the last couple of years where there have been additional residences built on properties. Kelly is another good example of one where they built a new one in front. I understand it's done by permit. No one does this without. If such were to be the case for this piece of property, I'm certainly going to say that I think we've been done with high regard. Some question was mentioned about the second height or two-story structure on that. If you would look at the first adjoining property on the same side of the street, it happens to be a two-story building. I do think this is the best thing that can be done, and I look forward to running by houses there that are beautiful, and this gentleman has built some very nice houses in Destin, and they all sold probably within 1 to 3 months of the construction. So you know they were very well approved, so thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public? Wave your hand so I don't miss you. If not, we'll go to the council. I'm not a Councilmember Ramswell.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, last time I had voted no. I voted no at the prior year's meeting that we had, and I did promise you I would take a look into it and reach out to some different folks and get their opinions. And I am going to go ahead and approve this tonight because I think you have done your due diligence, and everyone I spoke to seems to feel the same way.
Any other comment? We got a motion and a second, I believe, didn't we? Okay. I call for the vote. Unanimous, yes. Second reading of ordinance 1730 LC. Mr. Burns, by title.
Ordinance number 17-30-LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida, amending the official zoning map as referenced in the Land Development Code, Section 7.12.01A2 zoning maps to include a change in the zoning designation of the easterly 150 feet of 802 Cross Street, Destin, Florida, from Bay Estates to low-density residential village, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for jurisdiction, providing for zoning map amendment, providing for incorporation into Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. And this is the second reading on a quasi-judicial hearing, and the council, staff, and the applicant all agreed in the previous hearing that the same evidence could be used at this hearing. So I think you could end the evidentiary portion and turn it over to public comment at this time, unless the council has questions for the applicant and staff.
Questions of the applicant? If not, I turn it over to the public. Anyone, please let me know. I do not see any public. Any further discussion by council, or can I have a motion?
I'll make the recommended motion, Mayor. I move that the City Council adopt the proposed small-scale future land use amendment provided for in Ordinance 17-29-PC on second reading.
That's actually the one from the previous, but I
don't make that motion. So I'm going to continue to look to find the right motion.
I move that the Destin City Council adopt on second reading Ordinance 17-30-LC, amending the official zoning map to change the zoning designation of the property located at 802 Cross Street.
Second.
We have a motion. We have 2 seconds. Any discussion by council? Questions?
Had a 50-50 chance here.
If not, I call the question. Unanimous yes, motion passes. We have a second reading of Ordinance 1728 LC, provide for additional regulation of medical marijuana. Mr. Burns.
Ordinance 17-28 LC, an ordinance of the City of Destin, Florida relating to medical marijuana, providing for authority, providing for findings of fact, providing for an amendment to Land Development Code Section 3.00.01 definitions, providing for an amendment of Land Development Code Section 7.12.06 zoning districts, Table 7-2, Table of Allowable Uses, providing for incorporation into the Land Development Code, providing for conflicting provisions, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. This is a second reading and a public hearing.
Ms. Lejeune, further comment?
Yes, sir. There have been no changes since first reading, with the exception of we provided different maps that we hope are more legible. And then I'll turn it over to Ms. Bryla if we have any questions from council.
Questions from council? Not seeing any. This is a public hearing. Any questions, comments from the audience? I know you know the procedure, but please give us your name and address.
Mark Robertson, 881 Keller Drive, Destin. Yeah, just a clarifying question. The whereas for health and personal care stores, there just wasn't listed any examples, and I was wondering, I see it's, I know what a pharmacy retail store is, but when it goes to health and personal care stores, that's an allowable area. What kind of store is a health and personal care store, I guess?
Mr. Jim, is that part of the state code? Part of the state law?
If you don't mind, I can
respond.
Our current code contains a table of permitted uses, and the health and personal care stores are one of those permitted uses, and a pharmacy is included within that. So the intent of this ordinance is to treat medical marijuana dispensaries like a pharmacy. So that was the way to do it, because a pharmacy is included in that category.
The earlier paragraph says retail pharmacy, which is something I understand. How is a health and personal care store the same or different from a pharmacy would be my question.
A pharmacy is included within the broader category. There's not a use in the permitted use table just for pharmacies.
Okay, so when you walk into a CVS, you get your medicine in the back of the pharmacy, and all the other products down the aisle would be the health and personal care. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
Any other comment from the public? Not seeing any questions, comments from council? If not, I call for the question.
Do we have a motion?
Nope, we don't have a motion.
I move.
Make a motion, will you, Mr. Foreman?
I move the city council adopt. I was in the middle of doing it, Jim. I move the city council adopt proposed ordinance 17-28-LC on second reading and direct staff to forward the municipal code corporation for incorporation into the LDC.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion by council? Not seeing any, I call for the question. Unanimous yes, motion passes. Okay, consent agenda. None of the items were asked to be pulled. Is there any discussion before I call for a vote on the consent agenda in its entirety?
Mayor, I'll make the motion to accept all items from A through F.
Okay, have a motion, have a second. Mr. Braden?
I have a question. On the number A, I'm on the right one, hold on. Yeah, A, letter A.
I guess.
The no parking sign on Shower Street. Have we got that figured out yet, where we can actually, I guess where those signs are, where we can actually tow, or not tow, but ticket?
Yes, sir. We have the ticketing process worked out. The code enforcement staff is trained and certified, and we have ordered the ticket books. So they will be able to ticket people who are parked under the no parking signs.
Cool. Thank you so much. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. I have a motion. I still need a second.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I call the question. Unanimous, yes. We're going to move to council members' comments. Councilmember Braden, would you like to lead us off?
I'm good right now, Mayor. Thank you. I have no comment.
Councilmember Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say I had the opportunity to attend the short-term rental committee meeting earlier this week and kind of be a fly on the wall, and it was really interesting to hear the things that they're going over and discussing, and boy, they are really getting into the details and taking their time and really putting a lot of effort into this, so it was really good to see, and I appreciate all that they're doing. That's all I have. Happy New Year.
Councilmember Dixon.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Councilmember Foreman.
Happy New Year.
Councilmember Marlar.
Happy New Year to everyone.
Councilmember Destin.
I hate to break a good streak.
Oh, dang.
I do. So this Sunday, I went into Winn-Dixie at 12:37 p.m. and there were 6 lanes full of tourists checking out at the Winn-Dixie, and being that it was before 1 p.m., everybody was having their beer and wine taken out of the service aisle and put back on the shelves. There were 3 full shopping carts worth of beer and wine that were put back on the shelves. And it just struck me how stupid that seemed to be. I don't think we're really convincing anybody that we're helping the drunks from stumbling into certainly and I think that at the end of the day, we're only just hurting the economy. We're picking on a handful of it's hurting the Winn-Dixie, it's hurting the convenience stores, and frankly, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my opinion. So, to that extent, I was going to gauge the interest in allowing Mr. Burns to entertain the process of removing that language and just allowing the city of Destin to be the same as Fort Walton Beach and allow just the normal sales of packaged alcohol on Sundays. I know Winn-Dixie and several of our very local owners of convenience stores would surely appreciate it.
I would second that, but I can't. Discussion?
If it's a land use issue, I'll let Ms. Kopp maybe make your change. If it's we'll have to go back and look through it. So.
Yeah.
We can work together on it, Jeff.
That's fine. I think at this point, there's nothing other than consensus just to give you the directive, I think.
Is there any member of council that wants to object to it? If not, you've got the consensus.
Okay.
Councilmember Morgan. Oh, I'm sorry.
One more.
Excuse me.
And one more housekeeping item. This is just, a few meetings ago, we had some consternation regarding the Gulf Power RFP. Jeff, does our purchasing resolution have language that states clearly the council has the final authority to deviate from the resolution? I'm looking to just avoid future headaches and honestly embarrassments because we had a big giant ordeal.
It's not clearly in there. You have to read it over several times, and it's more an exercise of reading it and figuring out what is set forth in that resolution. It could be drafted a little bit clearer, maybe like a provision added to it towards the start, just making it clear, since council was the one passing the resolution, giving the procurement powers within the resolution that they reserve a right to override it at any time. So it could be spelled out a little clearer if that's the intention of what you want to do. So.
Well, if the council doesn't have any objection, I think that'd probably be something that we should explore and allow you to take a stab at drafting some clarifying language.
I assume consensus is good on that. Any objection to it?
Just one question, sir. Staff is currently in the review process of our procurement processes manual and resolution. Would you like staff to stop working on that and allow Mr. Burns now to work on it?
For point of clarification,
could staff do it, just add it to it during their process? Is that out of the?
The only thing I feel I was directed to do was just to add a simple little provision at the start. There is a much more extensive manual that they're working on that the authority to come up with the manual spelled out in the resolution. I wouldn't impact that in any way. I would just make a little change and forward it over to staff for their review or to y'all for your review. Mine could be done probably in a couple hours.
So that's probably the better way to do it.
Okay. Ms. Lejeune, does that?
Yes, sir. I just need clarification because we're working on the whole process, and I just didn't want to get in the way of anything that the council wanted to do.
Any member of council want to speak, add to it, or?
Sir,
you have consensus?
Okay.
Mayor, that's all I've got. Thanks, guys.
Councilmember Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor. So, thinking about the tree ordinance, and the guys from the Indian Bayou made good points, and I agree that impact fees for a 2-inch diameter tree, which is actually about 7 inches in circumference, is a little ridiculous. But what we can do is, when we send it back, we remove the fee structure from this ordinance. So we could pass this ordinance, tell me if I'm right here, we could pass this ordinance and then take the fee structure from the trees from 1 to, let's say, 5 inches and make the fee structure $0.
Right.
Right. Because the whole spirit of this was to protect our big trees. We're not, this might be burdensome for some folks, but we don't want it to be overly burdensome. We want to protect our tree canopy. And I think that some heartburn that those folks had, and that, you know, that we'll be able to set those, the fee schedule at $0 for trees up to 5 inches diameter, and then you're looking at a tree like that, a really large oak tree. So I think we'll be able to work on that there, and maybe I'll provide clarification to the public at the next meeting.
I guess by consensus, being we've already voted for it, by consensus, we can
yeah, we don't have to vote on it.
They do that on the fee structure. Any objections?
I was saying if we could change things as we need to,
Sure.
but the 2 inches is crossed out on mine. I thought we went to 8 from that point, but anyway.
I'm sorry.
You're talking about in your packet.
In diameter, yes.
Yeah, it was. I think it's crossed out because they removed it to put it in the fee structure, which is going to come back to us by resolution.
Right.
Which makes it easier for us to change that instead of the ordinance. That, and I've got some concerns from some people in Bent Arrow and Sandalwood maybe, where the crosstown connector is going in. We have construction going on there right now. I know.
Could you clarify where you're asking if there's construction?
Crosstown connector.
We're not in construction phase. We're still in acquisition for Crosstown Connector. There's no construction.
So on the old campground property, there's nobody working right now?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if David's still here, but
No, sir, he's not.
we're using it to store a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
we've got lots of.
We have construction projects going on in the city, and we've been using that as a staging area, so we've been putting materials there and pulling materials off.
And the acquisition's moving along as planned?
Yes, sir. The council had given us approval to do the next 3 acquisitions, and they are in the process.
Okay, yeah, because I've had concerns from one property owner and 2 tenants and properties that will be acquired or through eminent domain, I guess, if they refuse to.
We're going through the federal process, sir. We've hired Atkins, who works with FDOT, so we're doing everything according to the federal process.
Okay. Thank you.
And this may just be a scribbler's error. Where I pulled that 2 inches from is the tree credit table. A 2-inch diameter tree requires you to replace, if you cut one, you got to replace it with two. And I just assumed that was part of the rest of the ordinance. So.
Mayor, Ms. Williams, can she comment on that, please?
Myra Williams, 312 Calhoun. So the 2-inch is not, the only thing that's really, 2 inch is not, if it's a mitigated tree, then 2-inch is in fact protected.
Yeah, we shouldn't, yeah.
Okay?
I don't think.
2-inch all the way through is not a protected tree. So if he has a 2-inch tree and he wants to cut it in his yard because he doesn't like it, unless it was put there under mitigated circumstances, then he can cut it down.
Then that makes sense, actually.
That's the way the ordinance reads.
Okay.
Thank you for
Was that
clarifying
right in the 8 inches in diameter as far as diameter foot that are starting to be a protected tree of the certain type trees we are trying to protect? Okay.
Yeah. You save face. Get that egg off your face. No, I think,
It's,
I think Jeff Burns is next.
excuse me. No, I'm next.
You're next.
I just never speak, so you don't know it. On February the 5th, as required by our charter, we will have the annual State of the City address. I'm going to move that to just before a regularly scheduled City Council meeting at 6. This will occur at 5 o'clock on February the 5th. And I'd like to invite all those that are left in the public to join us for the annual State of the City meeting. And that's all I have. Land Use Attorney, Ms. Cobb.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Burns?
Nothing. Happy New Year.
If no further comments, I'll adjourn the meeting. Whoop, whoop, public, excuse me.
Mark Robertson, 881 Keller Drive. I saw you on TV talking about the Gulf Power, and I thought on TV you said that was going to be a closed meeting on the 15th of January. Is that correct?
I never said that. In fact, I was fairly clear at that session that it was a regular negotiating committee, which includes myself, city staff, city manager, city attorney, and an equal number of people from Gulf Power is how those meetings are held.
Is it possible that that can become an open meeting to the public in the interest of greater transparency and bring integrity to the process, which is the core value of this month?
I believe Gulf Power is one that requested to be closed. It's not required to be open.
And it's not a negotiation meeting. They're going to be providing us with their offer, which we're going to then take to council at an open meeting. That will be a meeting in the sunshine. It's not going to be a give and take type of meeting where we negotiate with them. So it's not required to be. Since the council won't be there, it'll just be myself, the city manager, and the mayor, and one other attorney at the meeting.
Okay, what I keep hearing is it's not required, but other things I've been hearing is that there is an interest of wanting to bring full disclosure and in the facts and to make that part of a democratic conversation if the public's
really
not...
get down to negotiating anything, I promise you, it will be open to the public and it will be a regular process. We're just in the dancing process right now, laying down the rules.
I feel like what happened last time when we were trying to talk about this, it's you guys had details that we weren't privy to, and when those details are being discussed, it would be easier for the voters to make an informed decision if we get to at least, I can understand not having a vote, but to at least have an ear at those kind of meetings.
I think the best way to get a full listing, if you wanted, is to ask for a public records request. I'd pull my papers out, but I I know I have over 600 or 700 pages of it right now. It's the amount of paperwork we're trading is very lengthy.
What's the website we have?
Yes, and most of the basic information is already on the website.
The another thing I remember from last week is that you were insisting that Gulf Power had the highest rates, third highest. I think one of the reasons for that is it was a word you used early. It's such a burdensome process sometimes, it seems like, to deal with the city, from cutting down a tree. I see Gulf Power as another contractor to do business. What happened? You had to dig the hole 3 times on Main Street. And I guess I'm concerned about the length and the burdensome and the micromanaging of the process, like on the park, is driving up the cost of business in the city. It's keeping a lot of contractors.
Let me interrupt you just a minute. The
away.
city has nothing to do with the rate setting process. That's between Gulf Power and the state of Florida. And we could go up and protest, but I don't believe anyone from the city has involved themselves in the rate setting process at this time.
I think I'm speaking to a bigger issue, just like you were saying, that the tree, what tree removal business is going to take on interpreting that ordinance and being liable if they make a mistake? But there's a lot of things like that in the process with other contractors and getting the building permits. It's a very cumbersome, burdensome, long time process, as you see with planning of this park, of dealing with Josh on the loaning of this lot. And what I would like to say for the public record is the burdensomeness of dealing with a lot of these common sense decisions seems to be driving up the cost of business in Destin, which it's making it hard to renovate and do other type of works, which would increase property values and be a blessing to the residents. That's my concern.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last chance. Council, I'll call the meeting.